This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So the focus for the Galway senior hurlers this weekend is the Leinster final, of course, against Kilkenny at 4 o'clock on Sunday evening in Croke Park. The first trip to Galway to Croke Park this year, so one to look forward to. I'm joined by former Galway minor and under 20 hurling manager Brian Hanley in part one of the show, and then we'll have Nickey Brennan to get the Kilkenny perspective on things in part two. Brian, first of all, the last podcast we obviously had John was after the Kilkenny game in round one, but since then, 4 wins in a row. Safe to say this podcast will be a lot different to the one we recorded that time.
Yeah, I was trying to keep a good side out for the whole thing. I did believe that they would have beaten Offaly and beaten comprehensively. I didn't really get to see Offaly being a threat to anyone in the Leinster Championship. It turned out that way. Um, I suppose Galway have improved gradually, I suppose is the right way to put it in every game. But Dermot had fair shout now of winning Leinster, and I think the way the last couple of weeks have gone, and particularly with the minors and the 20s, not really getting up to any gallop at all, that all we could do with a win. You know what I mean? Just for the whole hurling fraternity, because it's probably crying out for that.
Yeah, it's a good point as you mentioned there. The thing about this team is over the last few weeks, the wins against Offaly, Antrim, Wexford, and Dublin. There has been an improvement in each game, and that has to be the biggest positive going into this weekend.
Yeah, and plus the change of personnel hasn't weakened the team in any shape or form, albeit the caliber of opposition may or may not have been up to the level or standard of Kilkenny. That we'll find out Sunday. But like you look at the changes that they've made, I don't think anyone has come into the team and weakened it in any shape or form. Um, I think that's a huge positive, and I think you're now beginning to get a cohort of 20 to 22 players who, no matter who's picked, you're beginning to say, yeah, they can do a job, and they've already had the experience and done a job for the team. Like I think I said in the last podcast that they were Galway, Apart from Limerick, use the most amount of players in the league. But I'd suggest we're probably up there with the championship as well, the way they change things around. And you're possibly looking at anything from 5 to 8 changes Sunday compared to the team that started out in the Leinster Championship against Kilkenny.
It was really interesting to hear Fintan Burke talk about during the weekend the lead up to the game. I was just listening to the video earlier, and he said it's the strongest Galway panel he can remember being on. Obviously, he wouldn't have been there when they won the All Ireland, but he's been there quite a long time now. When you consider intercounty hurling, that is showing the competition that's there at the minute.
Yeah, but I think that's great to hear, and it's the positive. But unless you start getting wins under your belt, they're no stronger or no weaker than any other team you have. You have to go up to Croke Park on Sunday and win that game, and then you become a stronger group than you were last year, and a stronger group than all the teams that won it. But I think success and victories will only build a group. You can be a strong group, and ultimately, if you're not winning, it's not going to gel that team. It's not going to make that team win the games that they should win. And I think Sunday for Galway is more important to win than it is for Kilkenny. On the basis that we haven't won anything, and that's really in the last number of years. That's the anomaly on it. And we need to. There's a lot of youth being brought into it now, and rightly so. And a success here, while it may not ultimately lead to winning Ireland this year, but they'll have something to build on again, start next year to defend the Leinster Championship, and have got that will and feeling, and got it like 90% of them have got it at underage. This is the one you really need to get it at, and I think Sunday is crucial for that. And then you become the strongest group. To back up a says you become the strongest group you have once you start winning.
Brian, what do you make of Derek Fahey getting a retrospective ban for this game for, I suppose, it was a strike back with the hurl. Now we've seen some probably worse challenges, you would have to say, but like he's going to miss this Sunday. What do you make of him getting this retrospective suspension that wasn't picked up during the match but picked up after it?
you'd be very disappointed from because it's the first run he's got in the team. And, he's had good moments and he's had bad moments and he's been, he's come through it. And I think it would have been a great occasion for him because he has been given the vote of confidence of being the number one. And what he did, he did. It's a pity that the referee didn't act on it straight away and his umpires, give him a yellow card where then that wouldn't have come into play. But I think, look at not to go back into the standard officiating and that game was poor anyway. So um I'm disappointed for him personally and I'm disappointed for the team because they have like this is the high pressure. Like his game is a lot about these puck outs under pressure hitting him and he'd be under the utmost scrutiny on that next Sunday and he needs that for his own development and the team needed for his own development. But I'm sure I presume Ian will probably step up for that and he's been there before and done worn that jersey with great credit as well. So I'm just disappointed for him for Darragh more than anything else.
Particularly his first occasion to experience the Leinster final as well. It's disappointing for him.
Ah, it is. It's just like he got the number one. It's like Everton and goalkeepers. You need to bide your time when you get your chance, you take it. And to be fair to him, you couldn't like he's had good moments in every game, and he's come out and for me over the course of the league and the Leinster Championship, he'd be on the plus side of Everton. So, but he would have could have done with this big occasion to get another 70 minutes plus under his belt and to have tested himself and that of his abilities. And for him, he's the only loser out really is him because the team will continue on. They'll have a naval deputy in goals no matter who they pick. But he's ultimately has lost out in 70 minutes that he could really have done with because he hasn't. I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe he is. He's had that experience so far.
No, no, he wouldn't have played in a Leinster final. So Aina would have
Mm.
played in the last one where Richie Hogan
Mm.
broke her heart, but even the Killian Buckley goal, Aina would have played in that too. So
Yeah.
in one sense, I suppose Aina has that experience, which is a good sense. You're going to your number two. He has the experience of playing in a Leinster final.
Well, it's probably the only position that the senior manager didn't change in the Leinster Championship so far. Everyone else has been moved and tried here, there, and everywhere. So, like, it's not going to be, they're not going to be out of the championship come Sunday evening. So it's not going to be detrimental to the cause of the year. And it could provide to be the catalyst today, and it doesn't lose his jersey. If he gets it, he's going to have it on merit. It's up to him to lose it, and that breeds good competitiveness within a group. It's what you have a sub goalkeeper for. You shouldn't ever be complaining about that because the two of them are very, very high quality keepers and very little difference between them, I would imagine. Unless you're working on a daily and weekly basis, you wouldn't get to see them up tight, up close. But I know I think they'll take the chance, and I don't think that's going to be, it's a ruthless sport, it's ruthless, and you just move on, and it's unfortunate one, but it's a massive bonus for the other.
Yeah. It even gives someone like Darrell Walsh an opportunity now, probably to get a jersey that he hasn't got all year and get to tog out in the Leinster final too.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good goalies in Galway the last number of years. You can see in the club scene, been good Dara, been in goal at underage. There's good goalkeepers in club. You know what I mean? So whoever does get the number two the next day, presuming and it gets a start, it'll be a good experience for them. And if you just don't know after 10 minutes, we've seen it before in famous All Ireland where a goalkeeper had to go off, you know what I mean? So you just don't know what's around the corner and you have to be prepared. Like and we would have always spoken to underage and about these moments can come and if you're not ready for it, it's only yourself you're going to have to look back on. You never know when that will happen. And Sunday provides Dana with a chance and somebody else to be a backup and you just don't know where that leads to. But I don't think, it's unfortunate for Dara, which the team and the manager will just move on for this week.
Before we get into the Leinster final, where it'll be won and lost, some of the key matchups, um, maybe even look at what the team could be to start, Brian. It's not a stat I wanted to mention, but Galway's last victory in Croke Park, 2021, Wexford Leinster semi-final. Galway's last victory over Kilkenny in a Leinster final in Croke Park, 2012. They're not really too good statistics when you hear that.
No, but the day is going to come that's going to be that mold to be broken, and that's what will happen. And I think Sunday is providing Galway a massive opportunity, even to use from the very first day they played. I actually fancy Galway to beat Kilkenny on Sunday. Um, I I think they've been building gradually. Even going back to 3 years ago when Henry took the job, got that job that time. I was saying to the county board when we met them prior to that about the 20s, remember that year four, I believe would have been the year of Galway's best chance to win Leinster. 2 years ago, we probably should have won it, albeit for that goal. But I think they have a great chance. I think they're finding form at the right time. I think they're beginning to evolve as a group. They're beginning to get key players back in positions that we need them, and namely Dahi and David, which I alluded to the last time we spoke, and I felt that without the two of them having a major influence in the Galway setup, I feared for the future. And I think they've got Conor Cooney now coming on in a role that suits Conor and suits the team. Um, and I said that I'm going back to what I said in that last time we spoke prior to the Offaly game. Brian Concannon has really stepped up. I said if he didn't, we're wasting our time really up front as we were with Wheelo, and like both of them have been very, very good. And Tom Monaghan has gone back to midfield, which I was advocating that day. He's done very, very well in it. And they're beginning to get, and like you also have the Manions, like they're probably playing the best hurling of their intercounty careers. So when you evolve, they're massive positives from senior players who should be influencing the group. And go back to Finton's point, wherever he said that about the best group he's worked with or whatever, you've got a cohort of 10 players I've named there that are actually really, really at the top end of their game and coming at the right time to be that way. And you're backing it up then with your Colin Malloy's or your Young Burns or your Tiernan or you have other people like TJ Brennan has really blossomed. You got Keenan Fahey really come into it. The midfield, John Fleming has done well since coming forward. So these have all added to it. You've had Declan McLaughlin's had a run. You've had different lads come in and do different things. And they're supporting the main act. And I think that's what's needed to happen. Gavin's held his position at 6. So I think it's very, very hugely positive, hugely positive.
Do you think it's important to just put this? There's no point in saying otherwise. It's been a terrible record we've had in Croke Park over the last number of years. Do you think that Sunday brings on this significance to end this, I suppose, bad record for a goal hurling in Croke Park?
But that Sunday isn't going to change. That's still going to be a bad record over the years. Just we've won in the nearer future. I don't think players look into that. Management don't look into that. I think it's you live for the here and the now. That's anything that's gone in the past isn't in your controllables. It's only what's ahead of you. So it's what they can control prior to the game next Sunday and what they can control their game management through it. They've a lot of them have medals, of all Ireland medals at senior in their pocket the next day. And all of them nearly have underage medals. So Croke Park doesn't hold a fear to the younger lads. They've all won it like Tiernan, Cullum, they've won in Croke Park. You know what I mean? That doesn't we beat Kilkenny twice in Croke Park. So I think that is not going to hold any fear for them. I think that's just a media thing. I think it's just a perception by people. But even Galway wins Sunday evening, it doesn't change the poor record of that in Croke Park against Kilkenny or whatever. It just improves it a slight bit. But you live for the here and the now, and I think this team, I think there is huge positives to be taken game by game from them that lead me to believe that I think a performance on Sunday, is on the cards and a performance that, while we may have had a lot of wides and different things against Dublin, but our performance is still good. If we can shore up the back and don't concede goals against Kilkenny, I firmly believe that Sunday will be a good day for Galway.
Yeah, it was a question that just came in from a listener, Tom Clancy. With such a poor record for Galway at Croke Park, is it becoming a major mental challenge for this group? Do you think it's a mental challenge even when you go back, or do you not see it as that?
No, any player that gets the opportunity to play in Croke Park, there's no mental challenge in it. To get the opportunity to run out and play in Croke Park, Anthem previously doesn't concern anyone. Only what's ahead of you in the 70 minutes. Like I remember being asked a question, it was 12 o'clock in the day, we were playing our first day against Kilkenny, and they said, "Oh, it's awful early." And I said, "Well, you played at 7 in the morning to go up and play in Croke Park." Do you know what I mean? So I don't think that, I don't see the fear in it. Certainly, I never heard the fear of it from the lads that I know, and I never, I wouldn't expect that. Yeah, they've had a lot of bad results, but a lot of bad results in Thurles and in Innis and in Parky Creve and different places, but Croke Park, it's where you want to go and play. It's where you want, like, that's where you want to be. And there's nowhere else anyone that can hurl for Galway next Sunday would rather be with the opportunity to win their chance, you know what I mean, which is their chance. Everyone else has had previously had their chances, and yes, some have done it, and most have not, but they get their chance this Sunday. And I don't, in my mindset, that wouldn't be an issue. Maybe it is for other people, but I believe any player, coach, or manager going to Croke Park any given Sunday would not be thinking of previous records. Like,
Is there responsibility on the more experienced players to nearly wrap the arm around the younger players this weekend who haven't experienced an occasion like this, even if you're looking at some of the new players, your John Flemings, your Anthony Burns, to play in Croke Park? Like, I think they're expecting somewhere between 30 and 35,000. Like, this would be the first time probably playing in front of a crowd as big as this in Championship hurling.
yeah, but Anthony Burns played probably the most pressure game. Even more pressure was playing for Lochrain county final against Clappertagle because their record was terrible in county finals. And they
Yeah.
went in and they did very well. So, I don't think so. I think the younger lads, a lot of them played. We were fortunate to play with a full house in Croke Park and beating Kilkenny, and a few of them are playing next Sunday, and I've witnessed that. But when you go out there and play, I think anytime you ever remember what's around you, you're not playing while you're looking at the sideline to come off. So I don't think that plays a part. It's what you've trained for, it's what you prepare for mentally and physically. And it's what, it's ultimately it's a game of hurling just in the nicest venue in the world that you could ever play a game of hurling. And the competitiveness will come out. And there is an onus on the older lads, but there's also an onus on the younger lads. You can often see in the bigger day, traditionally in every sport, that the younger player blossoms and all that, you know what I mean? That they holds no fear to them. The older you get, often the more nervous you become. So no, I don't think so. I think it's a balance, and I think that's a word that we haven't used yet, but I think they are beginning to find a good balance in that team, which I alluded to the last time we spoke, and was, the need to get the balance of the Dahies and all that, as I've mentioned already, into that group. And it's cohorted by the Manions have really settled into positions, and it seems to be really beginning to gel now. And I think, that's what's going to do them all the world of good going forward.
We mentioned that we expect Ian to start in goals. Even if you're looking at the six backs that played against Dublin, Pork Mannion, Fintan Burke, Dahi Burke, Keenan Fahey, Gavin Lee, TJ Brennan. There's a rate of competitiveness growing here now because Darren Morrissey missed the last day. Obviously, I think it was a tight hamstring he had, so they didn't risk him. A player like Darren Morrissey could be left out given the way those six backs performed against Dublin this weekend.
Yeah, but like, yeah, really should have doubt Darren is left out, and they weren't on the 26, so he wasn't. So I don't know, is he injured or
Yeah, I think it was
not
a
on it?
tight
I don't know,
hamstring.
but I think, and like, you have able deputies coming in, and you have more to follow it up and back it up, and I think they've used the league well, and they've used this well, so far. Um, but like, what do you replace them with? You replace, like, from the first day out, you replace, Dahi's gone in there. TJ's really come on since the very first game, and so much went wrong in that first game. And as I said to you in that time about it, if Galway got the goal at the start and Kilkenny got it, could have been a different game. And I genuinely meant that, because I felt there were two teams on a knife edge mentally starting off. They weren't sure what way it was going to go. And I think Kilkenny were the exact same way, because they just avoided relegation from the league. So they were no better off. And Galway got the good beating, the two beatings in the league prior to that. So they were both mentally in a weak position, looking for a bit of form. I think now that since the Kilkenny game, I would suggest that the Galway mentality would be in a better place than Kilkenny, because even to win your last game and lose your last game, the psychology of all that, and I know they'll say they're different players weren't playing, but a lot of the big players in Kilkenny were playing. So no, I think it all bodes well. The way they've come into it, I think they've really come into it in a good narrative.
You mentioned midfield earlier, like bringing David Burke back in. He's been allowed nearly to sit back when we're out of possession and give that half back line a bit of protection. Tom Monaghan has been dropping deep there, and Sean Linan even the last day, like they really formed an impressive midfield partnership the last day, and even John Fleming's coming deep there as well at stages.
Yeah, but that's sort of system of play. It has to. The game's evolved that way, that you have to you withdraw out a lot further, and you have to have the ability now to get in after it. But then you also have the ability to create the space inside, and you need top quality players inside. Which, to be fair, Burns or Malloy have done very well at 15. Decky's doing well at 15, and then the two lads like with Cathal Mannion and Brian Buchanan in there. Like, you saw what they could do against Dublin, particularly in that first half when they got ball into space. And in Croke Park, that lent itself the opposite to that. Then it's Kilkenny are going to do the same thing. So it's how you pick them off of the field. And it was notable against Dublin when Tom Annan and David Burke got the points and started to pick them off from out the field, how they had to pull out, and that created more void inside. And it's a game of cat and mouse. But again, the next day for me, Galway to win the game will be one. Yeah, we're coming in good form and good confidence, and everything's going well, and the team is more settled now. You're naming a team there. It possibly will start. 6 weeks ago you couldn't do that. But the key to the whole thing will be that we don't concede goals. If we don't concede, like there has been a tendency that a run down to the middle has created, certainly if not a goal, a chance. And most more you're reporting long enough from watching in the more myself. If you see Kilkenny coming down through the middle and a chance comes, they're going for one thing, and that's a goal. So I think
Mm.
that for me will be my main focus. Dahi sitting back in, or Davis, who'll be sitting back in there. And you've got a bank of three really with David, Gavin, and then you've Dahi coming across. You'll always sacrifice the corner forward spot because the likelihood of the goal coming from there is, unless it's a real good setup, is not going to happen. So I think that's what they've tried to do, and if that works, and if they can tighten that even more, it all bodes well and gives us a great chance. And we are due the day of the goals the other end. I know we got them against Wexford for a finish, but we are due the day of it going right for us with goals.
Yeah, even with the other four forwards like Colin Mannion, Brian Cannon, Conor Whelan, Anthony Burns, like very hard to see any changes there really, given their performances against Dublin and even Cahill throughout the Leinster Championship as well.
Yeah, you just don't know who's been informed last week. It's still been 2 weeks since the last game. Things change. You just get inclinations of players. You just get ideas. You get something in your head
Yeah,
telling you to
could
go
put a
go
ball
this
through
way.
like
Yeah, you do, and you just run with it like yeah, you have to, and it's unexplainable to anyone from the outside. As I just say to you, you don't know the inner sanctum of what's going on, and nor should anyone do. You know what I mean? But you're naming names now that you know that yeah they could do a job, and they've already have given flashes and indications this year that they can do it, and that's why going back to your original question about Croke Park, does it hold fear? It doesn't, because these lads are used to it. They are used to it. They're used to the group they're with now. Clinton's words are, while they're very complimentary to everyone in the group, it just leads itself now that, yeah, we've got to go and get a performance. We've got to outwork Kilkenny. We've got to make the correct decisions on the ball. Our, game management has got to be at the highest quality, or otherwise you don't win these games. And then we've our defensive structures have got to be in place. And you bring all that together, you're not worried about how many people is there, whether it's one or five, 50,000. It's all these is what's going through your mind, and you're a small part of the bigger picture of the team.
it's Sunday today. Galway need to chase after goals. It's one area that they have struggled in the championship
That
so
is,
far.
but it is, but the day is you go chasing goals, you'll never get them. The day that you start playing more freely, and you start playing to your own style. Galway's style of hurling was always, move it, get it up, and you take whatever's on, whatever chance that presents itself. In the majority case, you take whatever is there for you. Yes, if it develops, you have certainly finishers inside, and that goes without saying. But I don't think you would. I've never set a team up say we're chasing goals here because we have to. We don't. It's a nil-nil start off, and it's only really the mid to the end of the game we have to make that decision.
If we're looking at matchups wise, Brian, this weekend, you're looking at the Kilkenny inside line of Mossy Keoghan, TJ Reid, Owen Cody. We're looking at our full back line with Dye, Pork, Finton at the minute, given that's the last full back line that started. How would you match up there with them?
I'd be I'd be of the mindset that I think Kilkenny be wondering what way they're going to try and match up with Galway, because what way are you going to change it? You're going to put Fint in the corner, and I don't think so. You leave Dahi in the corner, you leave Porrick in the corner. Where are you going to say you pick up who? I don't think it matters which one they pick up. Right? Maybe they decide themselves. They might have an inner draw for one of them than the other. You listen to what they'd say. They'd have marked them. They'd understand them. They'd know their ins and outs. They'd know their strengths and their weaknesses. And I don't. I think you'd pick according to how they feel best and most comfortable. And I I would be firmly looking at their own side. I think whatever Kilkenny have in there, they have. But with them three you're naming, they'd be on any team in Ireland, I believe. Them three are, they're very, very competitive. They're very good. They've proven themselves. So I wouldn't be worrying about who they're going to win.
Yeah, it does feel maybe like Finton could go on TJ Reid, given the physical. Maybe Dye goes over on someone like Owen Cody and Porrick picks up Mossy, but we could say all that, and it could probably be different on Sunday the way
And
things are.
Kilkenny and Kilkenny could start thin lads in the half hour line. So you just don't know. Like
Yeah,
you just don't. You just the game has evolved so much and players evolve so much. They become so adaptable, and I think you know the case is proven that when you see Porrick going corner back or Doherty going corner back, you go throw them centre back, you go throw them up midfield. It's you know what I mean. It doesn't really matter where they are. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather them in the full back line because they're three massive players, and you need to protect your goal at all times, and you need to protect. We even seen David coming back, and even Jock Fleming coming back, and even Quilo coming out now, and he's even got a lot more defensive when he plays going forward, and he's coming back, and I think that style and that system has helped them, and I'm not being remarkable when I say that. I don't know who'd pick up who, but I wouldn't care if them three would pull back on that.
yeah. Interesting from the Kilkenny point of view. John Donnelly and Mullen are going to be two crucial matchups in the half forward line. Like you look back to the game even in Nolan Park, John Donnelly was impressive and Adrian Mullen too. There are two players that are going to drop deep, and that's going to be important too because I think one area we kind of got caught in that Kilkenny game was maybe with Gavin, like Kilkenny were dropping very deep and Gavin was sitting back, but that's going to be crucial to we're not going to nullify both of those players for the full game, but to some extent to try and nullify Donnelly and Mullen this weekend.
Yeah, but it goes back to when we spoke last about our structures. I was saying to you that I didn't believe we had our structures right in place in the personnel in the positions. And I think you have the personnel in the position now. You've had a structure in place for 3 or 4 games. You've had two consistent wing backs and a centre back. You're beginning to have a constructive half back line. Um, your midfield is now becoming more together, more of a partnership. Your wing forwards, albeit I don't know will Tiernan start, will Connor Whelan start wing forward. I don't know what way they're going to set up there. Who they're going to start centre forward. That's your only line now that maybe is a debate in the way they work. Like whoever starts with two wing forwards have really got to sacrifice their game, come back about another 40 yards in the field, and then make sure they're back up again. They're your two midfielders now. You know what I mean? That's the way the game has gone. But I think you'll have your inside line and you'll have Kilkenny are going to have a lot of questions, the same as how are we going to nullify Pádraig Cathal Mannion, how are we going to nullify Ryan Cannon, how are we going to nullify whatever, you know what I mean? How are we going to stop David Burke getting on ball? How are you going to stop your two wing backs coming forward? So they're going to have equally as much question marks and questions to answer themselves. But I think our structure and our personnel has become more coherent and our understanding of each other's play is better than it was in the beginning of the championship. That I think that will nullify an awful lot of the Kilkenny try compared to what we saw the very first day and in subsequent Leinster finals. No, Kilkenny do get a run on teams, and when they do, all the space opens up, and it's very hard to defend that. But so do Limerick, and so do the Corks, and so do Galway in certain games. So you can only play to the structure you have set up and stick to it.
The shape of our forward line really gives Kilkenny something to think about, as you mentioned there, because Hugh Lauder's kind of always matched up with Conor Whelan, and Kilkenny have probably been comfortable with that matchup. But now with Conor Whelan out the pitch, Cathal Mannion out the pitch, and now Cannon and Burns nearly forming a two-man full forward line, that gives something different for Kilkenny to think about now, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and it's something different. They won't have encountered that, and likewise if Colin Malloy starts, they certainly won't have encountered the likes of Colin the way he plays. You know what I mean? So it's a different it's a different permutation within that they won't have had before, and it does look at it takes them out of their comfort zone, and I suppose that's what you want to do to this. Like Kilkenny are most established team in the country ever. Like Kilkenny, the way they play, they don't deviate. Yes, since Derry took over, they're starting to play the ball a lot shorter and a lot quicker and playing through the channels a lot more. But ultimately, Galway have got to come with something different as a setup, as a unit, as a team, and they're doing that, and it's evolving. And and I think that will pose questions because until this Sunday, Kilkenny won't really have witnessed what Micheál has tried to bring in the last 6 or 8 months with this group because it's really only developing now and it's only developing through the Leinster Championship and it's only these high stake games that you see how setups and your I suppose your skill sets and what the lads can bring to the table work at the highest pressure moment. So I think it will be they won't be able to guard pre-plan for that. Yeah, they'll have certain things in place, but it will be different for them, and it will take them out of their comfort zone.
Just with this, obviously, Kilkenny, huge experience at Leinster finals, going for six in a row, and that's something they're chasing after this weekend, and they have experience of these finals. We look at the result earlier on the Leinster Championship, Kilkenny 324, Galway 21 points. That result doesn't really pay much relevance this weekend, but Kilkenny are going to be a massive threat, and it's going to take an absolutely monumental performance here to get past them, isn't it?
Well, you'd imagine it would. I can't see. I don't think any Kilkenny team will ever lie down. And then I don't. But it's got to be about Galway though. It's how Galway approach their and impose their style of play in the game. If Kilkenny get to impose their style of play like they did down in Nolan Park, you won't win the game. But I think out in Nolan Park with the more stable team, with the more leaders that we didn't have that day on the field, with a point to prove, with a chip in the shoulder, so many years they'll win it, all that stuff. All these things lead to, go with nothing to lose. The expectation probably is on Kilkenny to win it. Um, and anyone on the outside looking in, there's a 12-point turnaround to be got back in a couple of weeks. Is that possible? Even when you start off 0-0 again on Sunday. So I think it's fallen into Galway's lap a little bit now. That definitely be no complacency, and definitely there's been improvement. And you'd imagine that there is a bit of a pick me up since the first day out, and we are getting our key players in positions and have done for the last few games, which has helped the team. And no, I think while it will have to be mass performance, and you're correct in that, I still think that it leads itself to a very, very, very big opportunity for Galway to turn Kilkenny over Sunday.
Brian, even with the amount of tickets here that the Leinster Council have given away to clubs for juveniles, the 20,000 tickets. I know we mentioned it for the Offaly game about a massive Galway crowd, but you would hope the juvenile clubs even would snap these tickets up because it's a great occasion even for some of the younger kids playing hurling to see their Galway heroes line out on Sunday.
It is, yeah, and plus they won't get that chance again if they get to semi-final or final. That opportunity won't be there. So it is. I don't know what the uptake has been. I'm not privy to any of the clubs or what they've done, but it is. I know that a lot of clubs went up to the game in Parnell Park and use that day. You know what I mean? Possibly not expecting this to come like this, but it's a great opportunity, and we need to, without the youth and without the club, you start your career and finish your career with your club like anything in the middle is a bonus. So, the great work being done by people in the club. So I hope they take up on that opportunity, and there will be hopefully a good crowd there from Galway.
What do you think a Leinster title can do for Galway hurling this year?
Well, it can breed confidence. That's the most thing it'll do. Do you know what I mean? It just as a group winning, it becomes a habit. The more you win, the easier it becomes. When you're on a losing streak, it's hard to break it. But like you win Sunday, you're in the Ireland semi-final. All of a sudden, you're one game away from Ireland final. The expectations. To start the league weren't great, and then they improved. The expectations at the start of the championship after the first game weren't great, and they've improved. I think it. I think it's very, very important for Galway to win Sunday based on what's happened behind them. I thought the 20s would possibly win that this year. They had a good group. I thought the minors, by all accounts, from what I've seen in the schools hurling, what I've seen in the clubs in the minor setup, I thought that they'd be certainly in the semi-final. So it's disappointing that we're not coming this year with that. But I'd you sacrifice all that for your senior team to be going well. So I think it's important to keep Galway hurling in the winners enclosure if you want, and that's what Sunday can do, and it just gets people talking about it and gets young people keeps young people invested in the game more so and seeing what is gonna.
It accelerates the project like to a new level, and I suppose it speeds up that project a bit. If you get the win, as you mentioned, you're in an All Ireland semi final, you're 70 minutes away from a final. It accelerates it to a new level, really, if result can go our way on Sunday.
Yeah, but I think you're only ever looking at what Sunday can do for you. And what Sunday can do for you is it can create the winning mentality. That's the first thing it does, first and foremost. And it stops. I wouldn't really even read into how many times you lose in Croke Park, because we're going to lose. We have an awful lot of years to win before you set that level. But it just creates a winning mentality within the group. and something you can build on. So when you do win, you can always build on it. You can go back to say we won All Ireland 17. Have we built on it? That's a question for another day. But you can only start with now, the here and now. You can't do anything about the previous years or year. So I think it's important for this group and for the age profile of the group that you have, that you get a win early doors for a lot of them, and show that there is progress being made. Back, trust the process, and trust the people that's trying to bring this process together.
Just you mentioned it, Brian, on the minors and twenties. We've obviously touched on the twenties. It's a few weeks on. Disappointing there. The minors probably just disappointed in the manner they went out in the Leinster final a week earlier, and it was always going to be tough for them to turn it around then after the week's turnaround against Clare last weekend.
Yeah, but the minor setup when we were there, we played 3 weeks in a row to an All-Ireland semi-final to get to a final. You know, do you, I I don't know what went on. I don't know how the performances weren't good enough. Whether I think the quality of players are there. I don't know. What the problem was. I know that the work would definitely been done and the coaching would have been done. So it's just disappointing that's 4 or 5 years now without really addressing the minor at the top table. The argument before that was they were sick of winning it and didn't want to win it. Now we can't get to the final. You know what I mean? Not to mind, we didn't get to the semi-final this year. So I don't know. That's for me. That's disappointing because that's again creating. You don't have to win it, but you can be up there at the top table fighting it for the highest positions, and that brings confidence, that brings respectability, that brings younger people seeing that there's a pathway to playing senior hurling that for everyone. And the twenties, you know, I suffered that more than anyone else when we weren't allowed to have players. The first year we had 3 players not allowed to play by the senior setup, which was crazy, so their development was completely stunned. The second year, same thing happened again. Like Liam Collins was left at home because there was a round robin game the next day. He wasn't allowed to partake. We didn't have him for a game. Would we have won it or not? We don't know. We didn't win it anyway, but we didn't have the opportunity to win it with your strongest hand. Um, Fergal's team this year, there's an awful lot of them with senior coming back. But like really and truly, if you're looking at the 20 setup, the player coming in, you don't have them in your ranks. Very hard to get that right, because you're playing all these challenge matches and you've all the work done. And believe me, I know that the two groups this year, minors and 20s, would definitely have the work done of anyone. They'll have every blade of grass covered that have ever been done. But when you don't get performances and you see the structure of the group you're trying to play with, like I can remember I was talking to Fergal obviously since that 20s, and you're playing so many games without players, you never get a system of play. And really and truly, I said 2 years ago, I remember someone when I met the county board when we were finishing up, and they said, does familiarity breed contempt? And I said, I didn't think so, but my argument was when you don't have your players on a consistent basis playing matches, it's very hard to structure a team and very hard to be competitive. And you could say that that's other counties, but in Munster they get them, and it's very hard. But I think you'd sacrifice everything short term now to win Sunday, and then I presume they'll all have a look at the structures of the minors and twenties again and see how we can tweak that to maybe to start pushing forward to where we were.
Yeah, hopefully now the Leinster GA can look at that 5 week break brewing in your group. I think it's something that definitely probably needs to be looked at when you consider Galway won those 2 games. They had a 5 week break and Dublin got 2 games along the way then to, I suppose, during that 5 week break. So it is probably easier to come in, not top your group and get that momentum on your side.
And then you'd have decided you're saying the minors are playing too many weeks in a row, and it's
Yeah,
it's hard to get right. You know what I mean? So we had both sides of it. We had a break. We had one after another. Personally, I enjoyed the one after another because that's what you had a group for, and you use them and you had them. But the twenties is a different conundrum. It's a hugely different set of, you'd admire every player and everyone was micromanaged into within an inch of their life because their lives are so structured. The twenties isn't like that, and their hurling isn't like that because they're dragged between you know, colleges are dragged between, and rightly so, but colleges is over earlier now, so that's not a problem. Like, I mean, the year we had it, Jeffrey's team in the UIG played a Sigerson or a Fitzgibbon semi-final on a Thursday and a final on a Saturday, and we were out the following. It's sort of very hard on the player that time. Now they have more time, but I don't know what the right and what the wrong is, but I think, you aren't far off if you're going to go down the development route, if you're with a senior panel, stay with your senior panel. If you're with the 20 panel, that's where you are, because they're not getting development. Like we certainly, the players that were with a senior panel, we didn't get to develop them because we didn't get to have them. So, um, and that's all. And signs by now, a lot of them aren't on their senior panel. They were in there at the time, so it doesn't work out that way. I think they need to play the group they're in, and maybe if you're to be looking at it long term, when we were involved with Croke Park and stuff, the structures years ago, an under 19 competition with the under 17 competition, and then you only play senior after that. That maybe is the way to go to get development into these young lads and let them learn at their own age.
Just a final word, Brian, on the Leinster final. You said from the outset you expect Galway to win and you expect them to get the job done on Sunday.
I do, yeah, I do. I really do. I wasn't downbeat. I'm not a downbeat person when it comes to sport anyway, but I'm not, I wasn't downbeat after the Kinney game because, little things went against Galway that day and personnel, like yourself, personnel is everything. And plus the confidence, like say Keenan and TJ have really had very, very solid championship since then. Tom Monaghan had very solid. John Fleming's been very good. Fenton's been very good. The Manions. I'm repeating what I said, but we've had an awful lot of players that were 8 out of 10 performances every game since. And then, David's come in, and then you've got the younger lads, like they've all contributed in some shape or form. Like the work rate out of Tiernan has been phenomenal. While the scores haven't come from his work rate has been, I felt watching him one of the games, his work was savage. Anthony Burns has done well, Cullen has done well, John Fleming's done well. I'm probably missing one or two. The lads that come in, Sean Lennon has done well, and I think they've all backed it up. They're all creating a positive, like even Jack Village came in the last day, the block he made, they've all contributed and they're all contributing to the group. And that's why I feel, that there has to be a bit of a chip on their shoulder and there has to be a bit of, this is it now. We're not accepting anything else. And I think, I really believe that you'll get that performance on Sunday. And I hope for the personnel of the management and the team, and for Galway hurling in general, we could do the lift now. And I really hope they do get it.
You just expect them to shade it.
I do, yeah. No, I do. I really do. I do. I know the caliber of player. I know the mentality and awful lot of them. I know, like, despite what people think, I don't think Croke Park holds the fear to them lads. And I think now as well, we're beginning to get finishers. We're beginning to get lads that come in from the bench and influencers. And, Conor Cooney's been massive player for Galway down through the years, as good a player as Galway's ever produced. And to see what he could do, maybe to start him, and I'm completely talking rubbish, but if he doesn't, now him coming in, he could actually win a game on his own. Have we had that down through the years? Possibly not. Do you know what I mean? Have we had people that can come in and say, that are at fullback sees Brian Cannon going off for being exhausted with 15 minutes to go, and next thing Conor Cooney comes in, like that's replacing like for like. Do you know what I mean? So I think that I think the group and the personnel leads me to believe that I think Galway, will shade it on Sunday. I do, I really do, and I hope so.
Great stuff. That's all we do have time for in part one of the show with Brian Hanley. We'll have Nickey Brennan with the Kilkenny perspective on things next up in the show. But Brian, thanks a million for coming on to this week's podcast. Now in part two of the show, we're getting the Kilkenny perspective on things ahead of the Leinster final, and I'm joined by Nickey Brennan to get the Kilkenny perspective on things. First off, Nickey, what's the mood in Kilkenny like this week heading into the Leinster final?
Well, Paul, look at the way county teams are now. You don't really hear much, to be quite frank about it. There's not a lot being said. I suppose we're still smarting after an under 20 defeat last Saturday. I suppose that most reflection on that. Disappointed we lost. Not unexpected, to be fair. Chip were always favourites and thoroughly deserved to win. I think more the manner in which we kind of played as much as anything else. So I suppose people are only starting to think about the Leinster final now. And maybe some people won't even bother going because of last weekend. So who knows? But look, it'll ratchet up a bit in the next few days. Kilkenny will go into the final as favourites, and they deservedly so. But they've had a decent campaign, bar the last game against Wexford when they lost it. It wasn't to be all and end all to lose it. It wasn't to be all and end all to try out some players, which was fair enough. But I think the manner of the loss and the fact that what we'll call the backup crew failed to kind of put up their hand and challenge for places. I think that maybe has got Kilkenny supporters, maybe a small bit worried that our panel is just hasn't the strength in depth maybe to cope with a long campaign. But when Kilkenny get to Croke Park, you do expect them to generally rise a bit to the occasion. Whether they're careful or not this time, I don't know, because Galway are surely overdue a victory.
The 20,000 free tickets to all the juvenile clubs, Nicky, it's brilliant in one way. You're just hoping that a big crowd can get to Croke Park, because if it wasn't to be in clubs didn't make the most of this, we all know from being in Croke Park, when it has sort of that empty feeling, it's not the same.
No, I understand that, but at the same time, I think it is a provincial final. It is important for the players to play on a good stage, and there is no venue in Leinster beyond Croke Park that will take. There'll be a crowd. As of yesterday, the expected crowd was around 30 to 32,000. There was a good take up on the tickets, the free tickets for the kids at an early stage. It has tapered off a little bit, which was probably to be expected. But I think the principle of it, that I think what Derek Kent and the Leinster Council done there was very commendable, and I think they saw the capacity of Croke Park and the opportunity to give opportunity to the kids to go there. So I think that was good. But if they got a crowd of 30 to 35,000, which hopefully could get to that, I think that will have justified putting it in Croke Park. It gives a special atmosphere to it, and I think we've got to understand as well from the players' perspective. They like the opportunity to play in Croke Park, and they don't get it, all that often by and large. I mean, bear in mind that there's very few players that will line out on Sunday will have won an All-Ireland medal in Croke Park. So that'll give you a sense that they still an awful lot of the players who will be there on Sunday have still to reach the biggest journey of all in Croke Park on All-Ireland final day. So they're hoping to get that, and the experience of playing in Croke Park will hopefully help them along the way.
Where do you feel Kilkenny are currently, Nicky? Because really good against Galway the first day out. Job done against Offaly and Antrim, as you'd expect. Dublin looked so comfortable, but then Dublin come back at the end. And obviously you mentioned the Wexford game there. They moved around the team and rotated it a bit. Like, where do you feel they are, or do you still think it's hard to know where they are?
I think they had a moderate league, and they actually finished it off on a high, beating Limerick. Now, you could look at that in a couple of different ways. When I chatted to John Kiley and with other media guys after the game, John expressed some disappointment and all of that, but I think deep down he probably didn't care. John Kiley just wanted to make sure we're going to hold our Division 1 status, and we're going to really work at the championship. And bear in mind, by avoiding a league final, he was avoiding meeting some monster opponents along the way. So I'd say deep down the league didn't mean a lot, but it was a decent performance by Kilkenny, because Limerick made a bit of a comeback late in that second half. So I think, having won that match, Kilkenny went into the Leinster Championship in good stead, and they continued that form against Galway. Now, that was a case of a combination of Kilkenny playing decent enough, but Galway just weren't up for it at that day. Galway were poor that day, and Galway, bear in mind, had beaten Kilkenny in the league earlier in the year in Nolan Park. So Kilkenny were well aware of what was likely to come down the line, and they were probably prepared a bit better for it, in the sense the way the matchups took. Because the previous time Galway had played some weeks earlier, the likes of Gavin Lee, and we'll call it the middle third of the field there, the backs midfield and half hours, they played a very dominant role. They were very free around the field. They weren't being picked up. So Kilkenny kind of matched that. And after Kilkenny's pretty comprehensive win over Galway that day, it did look decent enough. Now, realistically, we have to discard and I don't mean disrespectful, but the reality of it is the Antrim and Offaly matches, you kind of have to put a line through both of those for both Kilkenny and Galway, because they don't show any form. The Dublin match, from a Kilkenny perspective, it was an amazing game in the sense that Kilkenny were cantering at one stage and grasping for air at the finish. And quite honestly, Dublin had real good goal scoring chances at the end to even win that match, and could have won the match. And Kilkenny would have been left really smarting after it if that had to happen. That happened to Galway a little bit in Parnell Park as well. They were coasting,
Yeah.
and while Galway or Dublin didn't look as assured against Galway as they did in Kilkenny in the latter stages, nevertheless Galway were exposed a little bit, to be honest about it, that day. So both Kilkenny and Galway kind of have to, and I presume have done some learnings or taking some learnings for the Dublin game. The Wexford game, I suppose, from a Galway point of view, they pretty much controlled that over in Salt Hill from the off, really. They were always in control of that. And the Wexford Kilkenny game was, well, it was a non-entity in that Kilkenny were through. It was a chance for Derek to try a few players. He even played David or Adrian Mullen at centre back. I think he wanted to give him give him a match because he had got some Dublin hurling against Dublin, but not an awful lot. He's after having a badly hampered year with injuries, and but it was more important to give other players an opportunity. And the bottom line is they quite a lot of them failed the audition. Now, granted, Wexford, who had nothing to play for, did play like a team possessed in some respects, especially Lee Chin, and no Kilkenny player could lay a hand on him. So Wexford, I suppose, had a bit of pride. Okay, we're out of it, but we won't let these lads come down here and beat us. And Wexford have a very, very good record against Kilkenny down in Wexford Park. So I don't know, can you read much into the game because there's very few of those Kilkenny players will actually play on Sunday. But what can be taken from it is that we would be concerned whether Kilkenny's backup talent might be a problem if they have to be, because Croke Park on Sunday, you're likely to see both teams using their full complements of subs at some stage. That's just the way the modern game is gone now, be it hurling or Gaelic football.
Just on it, Nicky, for listeners who aren't aware, the Dublin game is probably Kilkenny's last significant game in the Leinster Championship. But the team that started that day, Owen Murphy in goals, a full back line of Mikey Butler, Hugh Lawler, Paddy Deegan, half back line of David Blanchfield, Richie Reid, Mikey Carey, midfield, Keane Kenny and Jordan Malloy, half forward line of John Donnelly, Billy Ryan and Stephen Donnelly, and inside Adrian Mullen, TJ Reid, Mossy Keown. Owen Cody obviously didn't play that day, he just or didn't start that day, but you expect him to get back in there. But is that the only really change you see with Kilkenny's 15?
I think that Owen Cody will be back. He's back training. He has had, again, a bit like Adrian Mullen, he's had a fair few injuries this year and he had a touch of pneumonia as well. So you'd expect to see him back in, or where they'll jig around the attack. Murphy will definitely start in goal. The full back line will be Mikey Butler, Hugh Lawler, possibly Paddy Deegan as well, although Paddy's our play anywhere player, which sometimes can backfire on the lad, but I think possibly could be our left corner back. I think he has a challenge with centre back. It's recognised that Kilkenny have not been able to nail down a centre back position. Possibly you could see Mikey Carey there. Bear in mind that that day in Kilkenny, even though Galway were well out hurled, I mean the one player who was playing extremely well and played well in all the matches, but was reasonably well held against Dublin was Cathal Mannion. He got no score from play against Dublin, but against the other teams, he was having just a roving role. And I spoke to him yesterday in Croke Park, and he likes the centre forward position, but he also likes that he has the freedom to go wherever he likes. And the rest of the other players are good at picking him out in positions where it might be awkward for a centre back. So Kilkenny have a little bit of thinking to do how they're
Would you
going to
expect,
manage the likes of Cathal Mannion.
would you expect Richie to move out to the wing then?
That's a possibility. I think, see, the problem with Richie, he kind of sits in the pocket, and that's fine in one respect. But if you do that, you have somebody has to kind of be prepared to pick up your man, and that could leave a spare player. So I think that's what they have to think about. Your David Blanchfield will most certainly be one of the players there, and I wouldn't be entirely shocked to see Fionn Mackesy in at the half back line. He's been played midfield or half forward, but he really is a half back. Big, strong guy and a great striker of the ball. I wouldn't be shocked to see him there in the half back line, and Paddy Deegan gone into the corner because I said Paddy is our play anywhere man, and that has its plus and minus for any player who can play anywhere. I must say that the midfield picks itself, Jordan Malloy and Keane Kenny. That's not going to change. The half forward line is, well, in the forwards, trying to remember now all the names you said to me there. There's
Yeah.
John
John
Donnelly,
Donnelly,
Billy
Billy
Ryan,
Ryan,
TJ
um,
Reid, Mossy Keown.
Stephen Donnelly was mentioned there. Do you think he loses out?
There's a
Cody?
well, he has been doing okay now. He has been doing okay. I mean, I think the question is maybe they might whether they start Stephen Donnelly instead of Owen Cody. But if Cody's available, he would be a serious option. But obviously, TJ Reid will start at full forward. I think obviously on the half forward line, John Donnelly is a certain starter. Mossy Keown is a certain starter. To mention two there, I just can't recall. Just having the rest of the names in front of me here now at the moment. But the forwards won't change much. I think the question might come down to is it going to be on Cody or Stephen Donnelly perhaps. But Stephen has played well now. He's of the players who've got game time in the championship so far, the newer players, he has actually done quite well.
You don't see them sticking at all at that, obviously, Mullen experiment that they tried against
No,
Wexford.
Adrian Mullen, I should have got good question. Adrian Mullen will play, in my view, will play in the forwards. He'll play wing
Yeah,
forward.
yeah.
No, Billy Ryan has been probably Kilkenny's best forward. Martin Keown was in the league, so Billy Ryan will absolutely start. Likely pick that centre half forward, and you could see John Donnelly and Adrian Mullen on the wing, and the full forward line will be TJ Reid, Mossy Keown, and Owen Cody or Stephen Donnelly. I think that's what it's going to. That's what I think the team might look like. And look, it's a good. That's not a bad team. That's a good team. It's a strong team. It's a team that will work very hard. And I think they realise that if they're going to win on Sunday, it will be about hard work. But equally, I know that Galway realise that when Kilkenny get to this stage of the championship, they're going to meet a team who's going to deliver hard work, because that's what Kilkenny are all about. Whether it's enough or not to win on Sunday, I don't know, because Galway are getting better. They have improved a lot since the first day against Kilkenny. The team has become a little bit more settled. There is probably a noticeable bit of added aggression in their play as well. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I know there's potential. Haven't heard the latest as we're chatting here, but it does look they might get a new goalkeeper for Sunday. And while they have plenty of the two lads on the panel who are backup subs, at the same time, it's thrown them into a Leinster final. It can be a bit of an ordeal. And but then look, it's an opportunity for one of them.
Just on it, it's fascinating, Nicky. Like Kilkenny going for six in a row. Do you feel the potential of a six in a row as being underlooked down there?
Well, look, the bottom line is if you want to progress in the All Ireland series, it is easier to get through to this All Ireland semi final. It gives you a little bit of breathing space. And Kilkenny had an opportunity during the course of this year's championship, with the way some of the matches were structured, and they got a weekend off, that they were able to up the training a little bit in it. Because generally speaking, teams during the course of the championship don't get a whole lot of time to actually train together, because they're game on game, so they have to kind of almost rest with it and just do a little bit of stick work. So Kilkenny, have make no mistake about it, will want to win the Leinster Championship. A, because they're the champions and would like to retain the trophy. That goes without saying, as indeed Galway would. But equally, Kilkenny have always approached the All Ireland series that if we can get into the semi final, it cuts out the quarter final. Because bear in mind, the quarter final this year will, in Kilkenny's, whoever loses the Leinster is very likely to be coming up. I'm going to say against Tipperary, because
Yeah.
Tipperary will be. I'm not expecting either of the Joe McDonagh finalists to defeat their opponents in the preliminary quarter-finals. Therefore, it will mean that whoever loses the Leinster final will play Tip, and whoever loses the Munster final will play Dublin. So
There's a
Kilkenny.
potential that they have to play Tip, Limerick, and Cork potentially if
Well,
there's
that's the point. But I mean, you can't look beyond
yeah.
Tip. So if Kilkenny lose on Sunday, they're coming up against Tip. Now that's a discussion for another day, but it opens up, conjures up all sorts of challenges for Kilkenny as to whether they're up to playing Tip at the moment. Now I do think that, funny enough, Kilkenny, if they were to get over Galway, I think potentially they could offer the stiffest test to Limerick, because they would not have a fear of playing Limerick. Not sure they'd beat Limerick, to be fair about it, but I do think that they'd offer them a stiffer test than maybe some of the other teams would. But there's an awful lot of hurling to be played. And right now, neither Kilkenny and Galway can look beyond Sunday, because that's the game. But it's understandable that we would at least allude to what's coming down the line. But that's the point I'm saying. Get through the Leinster final successfully, and you're knocking one big obstacle out of your way if you're hoping to go further.
On the matchups Kilkenny wise, it's a bit different for them now this weekend. Conor Whelan playing out the pitch. Hugh Lawler's always been the man who's picked him up. Cathal Mannion adrift. Is Mikey Butler to go on him? Like defensively, how do you see Kilkenny matching up with Galway?
Everyone speculates about if there's a sharp forward inside, that Mikey Butler will pick him up. Sometimes you can play that card too much. And, I think either of the wing backs, David Blanchfield, and I'm speculating Fionn Mackesy, I think they have the physique to match anything Conor Whelan will do. He looked sharper coming out on the half-hour line. He looked a bit isolated in the corner. He looked a little bit out of sorts. But he did show the last day against Dublin what a great player he is. Great time for Conor Whelan. He's worked great in general, but it just hasn't been coming from him. But he's had a lot in his mind outside of the hurling in the past year, and other things going on in his life. And we need to cut guys a little bit of slack on that as well. So, but he's sharpened up back again now, and the month of June is not a bad time to be back finding your form. I made the point about centre half forward. That's why I feel Kilkenny as a centre back, you can't afford to have somebody just sitting back and giving Cathal Mannion the freedom of the place, because there's no better sharpshooter from 60, 70 metres. And given if you have a decent day, and given the weight of the ball now, which is obviously, much lighter than it would have been in back year in the years, lads are able to shoot balls over from 70, 80 yards without too much hassle. And you're seeing most teams now that are successful, they're hitting up towards the mid 20, 30 point mark, maybe a goal or two, or maybe not, but they're hitting that. And if you want to be successful, that's the sort of target you need to be aiming for. And there's no better player than Cathal Mannion to find the range if he's given, and he will find the range if he's given the space. So I'm sure Derek Ling has a plan in place to nullify the threat of Cathal Mannion. And he only has to look back on the Dublin game, where they've done a very good job and not allow him to have that space. Now, admittedly, Parnell Park is a much smaller stadium than Croke Park. But Dublin did a very decent job there. Dublin's failings were elsewhere, not in the way they policed. I mean, what they did do was that it left Brian Concannon fairly free inside. But at the same time, I think it will take Brian, or Hugh Lawler he's arguably still the best full back in the game, and it'll take a very decent full forward to get the better of Hugh Lawler. But Brian Concannon was sharp the last day, but he'll have a stiffer test against Hugh Lawler, if indeed he's playing at full forward. But wheeling out the field will do a bit of roaming. You're going to see Cathal Mannion do a bit of roaming, and some of the other players. It's the nature of the modern game now for the forwards to pose the back's challenges. Don't stand static. Just keep moving and let the back worry, let the back wonder about where you're actually gone. And I'm sure in Galway's training with Micheál Donoghue and Franny Ford, they're the sort of things that they're going to try and be working on. The midfielders as well, Keenan Fahy or whoever it might be, Tiernan Killeen, there are plenty of mobility there. They'll be working their way back, and they were very good the day of the league match. The interlinking between the half back line. Pádraig Mannion was actually wing back, although I think he's gone back to the corner now. They were popping up and got quite a lot of points. And Gavin Lee, he wasn't as prominent today in the championship, but he was very prominent in the league. But he's generally settled in decent to number 6. So there's still all that thinking, I'm sure, is going on behind closed doors with both sets of selectors as to how they can outwit each other's tactics.
Isn't it a different proposition when you think of it? You mentioned there about midfield, and Kilkenny and Jordan Malloy have been very good for Kilkenny this year, but someone with David Burke's experience is going to be in there now. It's a different proposition for Kilkenny.
Yes, that's true. But while these two lads, Malloy and Kenny, they're not necessarily the strongest and physical players on the team. I would suggest that they have plenty of mobility. Their reading of the game is very good, and David Burke, still a great hurler. But I mean, these young lads are not bad either. I mean, Burke has a lot of miles on the clock as well, and the wide expanse of Croke Park is going to test any player. I'd be less worried. I mean, maybe earlier in the year I was saying, what the hell are we going to do about midfield? But so far the two lads have made the place their own, and are deservedly there. And if at such time as they fail, they're entitled to be there. And I suppose that's where I keep pointing out all stages, that if any of those 15 that I've mentioned, and I know we mentioned maybe 16 and that 17, if any of those people have to step aside for any particular reason, I do have a bit of concern as whether we have the bench to do it. I mean, I know Derek has expressed confidence in his players, and I think that's fair enough as a manager. I can understand that, and I credit him for that. But it's a question of will the lads who come on, they will be under a certain amount of pressure. But who knows? These guys won't be strangers to Croke Park. They play there at underage level, and who knows? Maybe the whole new lease of life they might get from playing in Croke Park might add something special to the day. Who knows? Kilkenny will be missing Shane Murphy, who's a huge loss. He was playing very well at the start of the year,
Yeah,
but he
there's a
got a
nasty
bad
injury he
he
picked
got
up
a
in the
bad
summer.
injury, and
Yeah.
I think he could be back maybe for an All-Ireland semi-final timeline. But having played no matches before that, that wouldn't be easy. But he's a real loss to Kilkenny, because he was an option at cornerback or wing back.
You mentioned there you've been impressed with Galway since that Kilkenny game. They've kind of really improved each day. Are Kilkenny at an advantage just given, like if you're looking even from a mentality point of view like that, Killian Buckley last minute goal has hurt Galway. Kilkenny have had the upper hand in Galway when it came to knockout championship games in the past.
Well, sure, of course they have. I mean, Galway will be coming to Croke Park, and they're given since Galway have come into Leinster. I mean, in an overall context, the number of Leinster titles they have won, I think generally speaking, we'd all be surprised that it hasn't been more. I'm not referring to any particular year, but no question about it. The last one, the Killian Buckley goal, was an awful blow to Galway. They kind of panicked at the end where things happened, and Kilkenny got a bit of fortune. It was a game that went from Galway, and a game they would have deserved to win, to be quite frank about it. And nobody was more disappointed that day than Henry Shefflin. I think it took him a while to recover from that. Now I know they came back subsequently and had a very good game in the latter stages of the championship, and then showed that they came back reasonably well. But that was a killer blow. But look, in a way, you can't dwell too long over that. I mean, that's history, and you can't do much. The best you can do about that is let it be motivation for the next game, and the next game is 4 o'clock on Sunday, and that's what the bulk of these Galway players. There was a fair chunk of them playing that day. Now, God Almighty, if that doesn't motivate them to make sure it doesn't happen again, and the newer lads that have come on have experience through playing at other Galway levels, have success against Kilkenny at underage. So Galway are not in a bad position, but until such time as they win a Leinster final, they have to prove to themselves and to their own supporters as much as anybody else the type of team they are. I always expected that Micheál Donoghue, when he would come back, would at a minimum win a minimum of one Leinster final and maybe more. I still hold that view. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's a very good way with players, but I don't know if that's going to be this year. It might, but I do think it's coming. It's coming sooner rather than later. But it mightn't come on Sunday. But maybe it will. I don't know.
Let's hope it does.
Well, of course, I can understand that, and being if you want to look at the wider hurling picture and just take off my Kilkenny hat, Galway's need to win a Leinster final is greater than Kilkenny's. Kilkenny will never go to Croke Park and say, "Oh, we don't mind if we win or not." That'll never be said by Kilkenny or by me or anybody. But Galway's need is greater. They have had disappointing results in the 20s and 17s this year from a Leinster perspective. I think they left the 20s behind them in the defeat of Dublin, and who knows what might happen with Kilkenny. The Miners were fierce disappointing this year. So, look, Galway hurling it needs a little bit of a fillip, and Sunday would be the place to start. And from a hurling point of view, that might be no harm if even if I say that. But having said that, Kilkenny don't go up to Croke Park just hoping Kilkenny go up to Croke Park confident that whatever is put in front of them, they can rise to the occasion. If they're good enough, they'll win it. And if they're not good enough, things that happen with them on the day, Galway will win it. And if they take the Bob O'Keefe back across the Shannon, well, that won't be any bad thing for the game of hurling either.
How do you see it going, Nicky? And in one sense, I feel we probably need a really good Leinster final this Sunday as well.
I think that when you look at all the games that took place this year in the two provincial championships, I think we can look at some of the Munster people can look to their championship with rose-tinted glasses. There were some very average games in the Munster championship this year. Yes, there were a few right good games. And Leinster, I'd say weren't far off Munster in terms of the real quality games they had. Now, they had a number of one-siders because, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, a couple of counties in Leinster were not strong this year. Antrim were struggling. Offaly are still trying to find their feet. I think they're probably not in a bad spot now. I think their under 20s will be gone from that grade and no bloody harm, so they'll be able to focus on. So I think I think they'll feel William with a better chance in 26. And you're going to see Laois or Kildare in there as well. So Offaly will feel they'll be going in with more confidence next year. They'll feel, look, we're strong enough to get over Laois or Kildare. Therefore, next year should be a year of building on what happened this year. No, because Offaly really should have beaten Wexford. No question about that. So they could have beaten Wexford. They obviously beat Antrim. And they weren't a million miles away from Dublin in Parnell Park. Now, they were well beaten by Kilkenny and Galway. So Offaly, I see there's real possibilities to build in Offaly. Whether they'll be able to keep going up the ladder or not, I don't know, but the possibilities are there. So there was decent games in Leinster, and Munster wasn't all a bed of roses either. Yes, absolutely some good games, but a lot of very average games in Munster. The occasions were obviously much bigger in Munster. The crowds were much bigger, and the hype about it was much bigger. And Leinster correspondingly had some very disappointing crowds. Let's call a spade here. And the Munster final on Saturday is going to fill up the Gaelic grounds. Limerick are the hottest of favourites, but I think Cork supporters did the team and Pat Ryan no favours earlier in the year, where they just felt it was a matter of going up to Croke Park to collect the cup. And you had one bookmaker paying out on the basis of winning a Munster Championship or something like that, which was utter nonsense and disrespectful to Limerick. Now, I think Cork will give a good account of themselves, but it's going to take some team to beat them on Saturday, and it's going to take some team to beat them in the All-Ireland series afterwards.
And just final words on Sunday, Nicky. How do you see it going?
I think Kilkenny are capable of winning that game. I do think that they still, if all of their players that we've mentioned, plus the one or two subs, if their injuries are not going to come back to haunt them, I'm talking about Adrian Mullen, who's been injured a bit, Don Cody, maybe one or two more. And if Kilkenny produce the sort of game that I know this team is capable of, I think Galway will find it hard to overcome them. But Galway can strike really hot on some days of the week, and Sunday could be one of those days. And when Galway go well, they can play some very, very good hurling. They have physically strong players, and it'll be a physical contest. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it's going to demand a bit of discipline from both teams as well. There's been possibilities this year where players have just reacted a little bit wrong, and they need to be very careful. There's been a lot of stuff in the spotlight, and no disrespect now, but Johnny Murphy's refereeing on Sunday. And if any of them step out of line, they'll be in bother. So I think I would expect both coaches will have them well tutored on the refereeing style of Johnny Murphy. That don't give him difficult decisions to make, or don't make him with big decisions to make, rediscipline and all like that, because you mightn't like the outcome of it. I think Kilkenny will get there, but I don't think Galway are without a chance at all on Sunday. If they rise to the occasion, they could win it. But I'm sticking to Kilkenny, not because I'm a native, but I just feel that Kilkenny have done that little bit more. They're entitled to be favourites and see the game out. But I'd never dismiss Galway. I think there's something about them this year. They're on a journey with Micheál Donoghue. How far that journey will go on Sunday, I'm not so sure. But I do think the journey is it is a good journey commencing there with Micheál Donoghue.
Great stuff. So Sunday, 4 o'clock, the venue in Croke Park for the Leinster final between Galway and Kilkenny. That's all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks a million to Nickey Brennan for coming on to this week's podcast.